The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host Keith Campagna.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode, actually the 32nd one of this year of 2020 of Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. And welcome, everyone, to thank you, everyone, for being part of Googlization Nation. We are growing. We're getting about 50 or 60 new people a week, and we're getting a lot more activity, and we really appreciate you being part of it. Before we go much further, I also want to make sure that everybody's staying healthy, that you and your teams and your family are safe and doing what's needed to kind of help us get beyond this. So please wear your masks. We want you to be safe, but please protect other people by doing that. That's what the masks are for. And hopefully, it's going to be a long haul this fall, but hopefully we're going to be able to get out of it. We're going to have a bit of a special show today. I had the opportunity to interview last week John Sanei. John is part of Singularity University, and he's actually Africa's first faculty member from Singularity University. He is also on a couple other institutes, a Futurist Institute. You'll hear a little bit more about him. But we recorded it, and we had just I had an extraordinary time with him. It's just been phenomenal. And if there's any indication of how good he is, my mother, who will be 97 next month, I sent it down to her. I thought she'd be interested. And she just loved it. She sent it out to all her friends. So it's a topic that you'll hear segments of this. We didn't have the opportunity to rebroadcast the whole show. And we had an opening this week. So I took out the highlights, the clips. So what we're going to do is Keith and I are going to be talking a little bit about that. We're going to listen to it with you, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about it. Keith had not heard it, and I want to get his take on it. But one of the questions I asked, and it's always, we interview a lot of super smart people, thought leaders and influencers, and they always have, they're ahead of the curve. I mean, if we want to talk about that, as much as ahead of the curve as you can possibly be these days, but they are pretty astute and up on things. And one of the things that always interests me is it's tough to stump our guests. But I asked this question, and I'm going to kind of lead into Keith with it as well. I asked this question to John, and as a futurist, I was sort of surprised at his answer, but I was pleased. And his first comment was that, the question was, what was the oddest thing that you experienced or that you've seen as a result of the pandemic? And his response was, that's a really odd question. And I haven't, and no one's ever asked that before. So and you'll hear this from him. He said he liked that. So I've started to ask a lot of people, what's the oddest thing? I mean, because we've been experiencing a lot of really odd things. So think about that. What's the oddest thing that you've seen? Let us know. You can put it in the chat. You can, or sometimes to get a more active response, if you want to put it up on LinkedIn, you can message us, Keith or myself, and let us know what was something totally unexpected, something shocking, something odd that's happened that totally. Again, I guess that it's just kind of came out of left field. So, Keith. We've been talking for months. I mean, we've over the last 2 years, we've been talking a lot, but we've been talking to a lot of people. We hear some great ideas. We've experienced some odd things, some of the unexpected, and yet then here we are in the 6th month of this pandemic. Looking back, what's the oddest thing you've seen? Totally kind of again, just totally unexpected. Other than a pandemic. So.
Well, you mean in terms of so I think I actually watched this. You posted this onto the on LinkedIn, right?
I had sex. Yeah, I had.
You sent a shout out, and I remember thinking, "Holy cow!" John was like, he said, "Other than everything, being odd, that's a good something like that." So I'm looking forward to getting the full scope here. But in terms of the most odd thing that's happened is, It almost feels like it's too easy to say based off of the idea that somebody out there might have been listening to us for the last year and a half, almost 2 years. And that is that people are surprised by all of this. Like we talked, I mean, the future of work is our, like, I guess I'm thinking the people in the business world are surprised with how they don't know what to do. And there's almost so much opportunity now for people to take advantage of. What the oddest thing to me is how almost resistant or blind people are to the simplicity of taking advantage of the opportunity. We've talked about this on the podcast earlier with previous shows. I really wasn't paying attention too much in 2008 and 2010 when the Great Recession took place, because I had babies and I was really, really busy with working at ADP, and I didn't really notice the macro opportunities that were taking place. I was just too busy doing my own thing. But the odd thing to me is how many people I'm talking to that are like realistically having and realizing opportunities of a lifetime, opportunities of a career. New businesses are being developed. We talk about, I forget who coined the phrase, but somebody mentioned how 3 years of change took place in 3 months. And to me, it seems so opportunistic. There should be so much more positivity coming on. So that to me is probably the oddest element, but I guess to the victor, the spoil.
Well, you're definitely going to hear some things about it, and we're going to lead into this now, because I do want to make sure that we hear from John. And again, it's just seven or so minutes of part of his presentation, and then come back, because what he talks about is how life was complicated before. We've heard that for years. People just said life's just way more complicated than it used to be. Well, we moved from complicated, if I can say it, complicated to complex. And he had a really, really insightful approach to that. And it falls in lines what you were talking about of identifying opportunity within that complexity. And, I even addressed that in my TED Talk. We talked about VUCA, being volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And yet the approach to that, the way out of that, is by vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. So there is a path, and some people get paralyzed by it, and some people see the opportunity standing right at our footstep. So with that, I'd like to lead in. You're going to hear a brief introduction of John's background, and then he's going to talk about something, the reason I reached out to him in the first place, because he posted something about how we need to change our world, our approach, almost everything, whether it's education, industry, learning, transportation, the way we do everything, because we're now moving from complicated to complex. So if Rebel can, our wonderful engineer, can tee that up for us, take a listen. John is what he calls himself a knowledge mercenary who travels the globe to uncover lessons needed to shift communities and help humanity thrive. And we all need that in this time. But as I mentioned, he's Africa's first faculty member at Singularity University in San Francisco. He's a lecturer at Duke Corporate Education in Johannesburg. And if you haven't, when you hear him speak, you'll know he's from South Africa. He just told me right before the show he actually went to the same school as Trevor Noah. So he set the ground for that. And he's a partner at the Copenhagen Institute of Future Studies. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to be here and to meet all the good people up there on that side of the world. I'm obviously on the other opposite side of the world right now in Cape Town. So hello to everybody. And Ira, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Hey, one of the things, I gave you a little hint on this because I know it's a tough question, but we're going to talk about what the future is like. One of the things is one of the questions I want to start out with is you study this, you study change, you're trying to anticipating this, you're trying to learn. Is there anything that really seemed odd or unexpected during this pandemic? I mean, anything that really surprised you that got you off guard?
An odd question, and I like it because I've never actually been asked it. I think the pandemic itself is as odd as it gets. The first time I heard that Italy was going into shutdown, it was the first time I'd ever heard of 60 million people going into shutdown. That was really odd for me in many different ways. The second thing that I find really odd is something that we have termed the Corona Coaster here in South Africa. I'm not sure if it has the same name there in the States, but the Corona Coaster is this incredible roller coaster of emotions that everybody's going through. You are pinging between despair and hope, and this lack of anchor into the future has many of us exhausted, and our emotions are really at the end of their wits in many, many different people's lives. So for me, the odd thing is this inability to understand the future and not have an anchor into it is by far the oddest thing, because I don't think any of us have ever had this situation happen to us where we're not looking forward to a holiday. We're not looking forward to, we actually don't even know what to look forward to because there is no end date to any of this. As a futurist and somebody that's always been interested in the future, I find it really tough that there is absolutely no certainty about what's to come. It's almost as if all the trends have been put out and have been postponed or canceled in some way. And we are now finding ourselves in a totally uncertain world. And so that any time that you are suffering from uncertainty and you don't know what is to come, the only thing you can manage is your behavior. And where you are able to manage your behavior, that becomes the key for you to thrive in a world that the paradigm and the rules and laws have changed for life and business. So the idea around complexity and complicated world, I'm not even going to go into simple because it's from far away, but let's start off with complicated to complex, because I think that's the real crux of it. The reason we are in this sort of predicament or in this sort of new state is that every business has three pillars: the pillar of forecasting, planning, and executing. And what has happened now is that the forecasting pillar has lost its traction. It's lost its power. The world's best futurists claim they can see 400 years in the future, 400 days in the future. And many of us can only see maybe a month or 2 months into the future because there's so much changing all the time. And the reason is that we have now squarely and firmly moved into a complex world. The world we came from, we were able to preempt the future based on past patterns. So let's look at what it means to be a complicated world. A complicated world has patterns, but these patterns are repeated. These complicated patterns can be worked out using mathematics and automation. And ultimately, these patterns become automated because they are just a set of repeated patterns. And that's what mathematics loves so much. Complexity, on the other hand, has very intricate patterns, but they are not repeated. So you cannot use maths and automation to work yourself out of complex situations. And so what we need is we need to focus and realize that the world of complicated is a very different beast in as far as what you focus on. In a complicated world, you want to focus on hyper efficiency to bring about productivity and profitability. In a complex world, you need to focus on robustness and longevity. You need to express yourself in many different versions. And so the analogy that I used in the video that you're talking about is when you arrive at an airport and you put your suitcase onto the conveyor belt, what happens is that the suitcase moves towards the plane, finds itself onto the same plane that you're on, hopefully, but most probably it does. utilizing automation, mathematics, and patterns that repeat themselves, hardly coming into contact with another human being, mostly automated. Why? In a complicated world, you focus on efficiency and getting to target. Now, you get onto the plane. The plane now is not going to be dealing with a complicated world. It's going to be dealing with a complex world. In other words, when the plane is up in the air, you have no idea what's coming at you. Will a bird fly into the engine? Will 3 of the engines malfunction? Will 2 of the pilots pass out? Will there be a lightning strike? We don't know. So what happens when you get onto a plane? The plane is built for complexity, not complications. And so because you have no patterns that are repeating, you have 4 engines when 1 is enough. You have 5 operating systems in case one breaks down or one falls away or one malfunctions, in case some new problem arises up there in the sky. And finally, you have 4 pilots when 1 is enough, in case one of the pilots has a bit of trouble. So we have to realize that we have moved from a world of just in time to a world of just in case. We need to realize that the just in time scenario was focused on efficiencies. The just in case is a world that we cannot preempt what the future will look like. And so what we need to realize is that as a baker, you can't just bake bread anymore. You have to have a YouTube channel. You have to teach a course on how to bake bread. You have to sell flour that you grow yourself in the farm where you come from. You have to have an apron range that you can sell to people. You need to have a robust expression of how you come forward into the world. And whatever business you're in, the more robust you are in your expression, the more chance you have to thrive, rather than just merely focus on one sector and try and survive.
There's so much within that to unpack. One of the things, I love how he talks about moving from efficiency to robustness. Going from just in time to just in case. The first time you heard that, and maybe today was the first time you heard it, what were your takeaways?
So, interestingly enough, my first job out of college was selling material handling systems and forklifts. And I quite literally learned sales in the just-in-time manufacturing supply chain era, where just-in-time wasn't new, but it came. If I remember correctly, it was a Toyota methodology, and which is my way of saying that I've been talking about just-in-time for a long, long while. And I mean, I like it a lot. I like the fact that he's bringing awareness to, the notion of being prepared up to a certain degree is really a thing that people have to come to terms with. There's certainly nothing that there's no way anyone predicted what we're experiencing now. What about you? What did you get from his comment?
So there's a couple things. One is, I think just putting it under those terms, and again, whether it's correct, whether he's right, or whether it's still evolving, and I would probably go with the evolving, is that there was at least sort of putting it into a context of what are the opportunities out there, how do we need to change. But what was most striking, I think, from that, and you're going to hear in the segment after the commercial when we get there, is how we sort of milked that just-in-time efficiency. Going back to, efficient, the model of efficiency in our economy was really going back to Henry Ford's time. How do you get most of the cars out? And then, the automobile industry, the automotive industry, transportation industry, drove manufacturing, and manufacturing drove our economy for almost, not quite 100 years, but most of 100 years. And it was all based on this efficiency and production. And that worked as long as we lived in a complicated world. But now that it's complex, we needed to change. So I think he put it in the context. But the other thing is, and I keep hearing this from people, that people want to go back to normal, even go back to work. And it's interesting because back to work is just going to be crazy it's not complicated, crazy complex. right before this, I was supposed to be out in Indiana, giving a presentation, and obviously not. But they were delivering the webinars, and they had a webinar, and it was from attorneys, and the attorneys were talking about the response to COVID, of what should be expected, what do employers need to do, all the way, from OSHA to to leave, to HIPAA, to health, to unemployment, to litigation. I mean, there's a million things. So the life for employers got a whole lot more complex, and it was pretty complex before with all the regulations that they needed to comply by. It is crazy because one is the rules, I can't remember which agency, but let's say it was OSHA. OSHA comes down one day, and OSHA, by the way, only protects the employees. It doesn't matter if you're a consumer, if you're a customer and you walk in there and you're injured, that OSHA doesn't protect you. It protects the employees. HIPAA is about everybody's privacy, but basically, you have to be careful with that. So even the simple act of, hey, when everybody comes in, we take a temperature check. And you and I, we talked about this 6 months ago, so I think we were way ahead of the curve on this. We talked about what happens when somebody comes in, and you get your temperature checked. Even if it's normal, you're not supposed to reveal that. But if it's not normal, and you pull somebody.
Oh, did I lose you, Ira? Well, I know where you're going with it, and I'm going to take it from here until you pop back
here now.
There you go.
Welcome back. Yeah. So, I appreciate that. I don't know what's going on today. The complexity of our world. Yeah. We talked about that. I mean, as soon as you come in and you have a temperature check, you could comply with OSHA to keep everybody safe that you're doing the temperature checks, but then you violate HIPAA because you pulled somebody out of line and revealed that somebody went home. How do you even send somebody home after that? So there's a million challenges, and I was even overwhelmed. And I thrive on complexity and somewhat chaos. But I'm listening to this, and it's like I couldn't even keep track of all the different laws. And in fact, they had 5 different attorneys giving presentations, and they all had a specialty. It was like a subspecialty of responses and litigations going on from COVID. And then you got into the unemployment insurance and the tax and accounting, and with where we stand now, it's going to be crazy. Nobody's going back. I mean, nobody's going back to work. Work is going to look very, very different. I mean, everybody's going to go. We have to work, but nobody is going back to work.
We're coming right, and we're coming back up. We're coming up on the break time here. You got me all excited about getting this out of my mind here, Ira. The real, we started the today's podcast talking about or with the question, what's the oddest thing? To be honest, considering that this happens to be our podcast, and we happen to have all of the other podcasts recorded, we have the proof, so I could say it without sounding like some sort of a know-it-all, but we've been talking about this the whole time. And we talked about how work is being redefined. And if you recall, and it's funny how we're now reliving our stories about what happened when we first got the whole COVID thing coming and hitting us. But the first question I had on the podcast the day the shift hit the plan was, how many people are going to be staying at home? Because that has completely shifted the world into a need to have digital transformation. And that's precisely what we talk about all the time. We talk about how, for me, life-work integration is where emotional and artificial intelligence converge. And now we have a true need. We have you mentioned people wanting to go back to the old way of doing things, whether that's normal or work or whatever. It doesn't exist. It's as real as the dinosaurs are now to us. And that didn't even have to do with the legality of it, the OSHA component of it. I mean, I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they were asking me about doing a life-work integration, like live presentation, and talking about how now there are venues who are making no money maybe they'll be willing to split up, like every 6 seats, you can have 2 people sit there, like, because it puts butts in the seats and it keeps a distance. And for the record, I don't think I'll sell out any venues quite yet, but maybe a couple dozen people will show up knowing that there'll be a limited amount of space and room to be had. So there's like all these crazy shifts going on. And then it reminds me of our buddy, his name just escaped me. The economics guy,
Alan Below.
Alan, right? Like they were talking about how they originally said 6 months and everything was gonna be, okay. But what they really emphasized was the immense amount of change that's going to come.
Yeah, and I tried to get Alan on, but he is so busy, and he promised he'd be on in the fall. So for everyone out there, so hopefully we're going to be able to get him in the fall back again. But you're listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. I'm here with my co-host Keith Campagna, and we're talking about the interview we did with John Sanei. And we're sharing a couple clips with him because it is just it's fascinating. I'm just mesmerized. I keep going back and listening to it over and over again. We're going to be talking about when he comes back. We're going to be talking about what his view is on the future of leadership. Which is fascinating, and also something he calls foresight. He talks about 4 mental mindsets. And the one that's going to count the most is foresight. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to hear from our sponsors, Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions. So stay right where you are. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. Hiring top talent shouldn't be left up to the roll of the dice. And yet, that's exactly what many organizations do. They roll the dice, cross their fingers, and pray for a better outcome. Hiring the right employees the first time is much too important and way too costly to leave to a game of chance. Your employees and your customers deserve better. For 25 years, Success Performance Solution has been helping small and medium-sized businesses hire smarter. They offer pre-employment and leadership assessments from typing and data entry to C-suite competence. Whether it's production, sales, healthcare, call centers, or management, Success Performance Solutions can help. Visit their website at www.successperformancesolutions.com to schedule a free demo or call 800-803-4303.
Imagine how your company would grow if your candidate experience earned a 99% approval rating. Well, to get to 99%, you need the 3 best letters in recruitment technology, XOR. Zor's text bots, chat bots, and audio bots increased IKEA's candidate conversion rate 455%. Zor decreases candidate drop-off rates, improves your candidate experience, and collects analytics for future strategies. To learn more, check out Zor.ai. That's XOR.ai.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. I'm your host, Ira Wolf, and I'm here with Keith Campagna, and we are talking about future leadership, future work. During the break, Keith and I were just chatting and kind of going back over the last 6 months of people we talked about, and it's hard to believe. I mean, we talked with Jason Cochran and I'm drawing a blank on his name too right now. But back in March, we were talking about crisis management, how to get out of it. We talked about Bill Coletti. We talked about reputation management, how important it was going to be, and that was just at the very outset of this. And here we are, 6 months later, and people are still. I think they just thought it was going to pass. But during the break, we brought up. I guess one of the odd things is, that we keep hearing it, that how did the country with the best healthcare system or the best medical care, I won't say healthcare system, but medical care in the world, the most advanced medical care in the world, why are we still struggling? Why are we in this situation? And it was because the delivery system, going back to what John Sanei was talking about being efficient and productive, where it wasn't robust. I mean, the difference between efficiency and robustness.
Yet the difference between efficiencies and being robust is the same as being prepared for what's to come next or sitting back on your business laurels. And I think that when we look at the medical industry, the healthcare industry, we look at it as a system that was set for one specific, really functioning in one specific money-making way, and that's the high-end, the cancer treatments, the Pfizer drugs. A lot of the high-end profit comes from the research and development-based services. And now we see how we couldn't deliver on a mass need as it relates to healthcare needs with COVID. And I think it reflects more on the systems that were in place that were really fragile and really in a position to break wide open. And that's what I see us having right now. You know, we spoke at length and I presented in front of SHRM groups, HR groups, CFO groups, business owner groups. And we essentially talked about how before COVID, 70% of the entire workforce was disengaged in some way. And I don't care to hear HR's fluffy terms about disengagement being partially disengaged or seriously disengaged. Disengaged is disengaged. It's like saying you're honest when you go, when you're going to go to a convention and you tell your wife before you leave, hey, honey, I'm going on a vacation. I'm going to be kind of loyal to you. You know, you're not kind of loyal, you're loyal. So you're not kind of disengaged, you're disengaged. And at the very same time, we were saying that 70% of the workforce was dealing with some sort of mental stress scenario, and well-being, the well-beingness of entire workforces was essentially a question mark. And then this came and this broke everything right into, and it broke the political system. It broke the global finance system. It's breaking civil-based systems. And we're talking, and I mean this in a positive way. I don't see the straw, the proverbial COVID straw that broke the camel's back as being negative. I don't want anybody to be harmed. I don't want anyone's parents to die because of COVID. But the truth of the matter is, I sell software, and I've had people buy software and have to implement that software. And change is messy and it's hard, but it's worth it. And I think over time, this could prove to be, and I sincerely hope this proves to be that unbelievable blessing in disguise.
And I'm with you, which is a great segue into the next segment with John, because John's going to talk, when we go to John, it's going to come in right away. But what he talks about is these four mindsets, and he calls them hindsight. Just give you a heads up: hindsight, plain sight, insight, and foresight. And it really is that progression. And this is about a mindset that either this is the worst thing that ever happened to us and the world's going to hell in a handbasket, or there is just abundance of opportunity sitting right in front of us. And then he's going to talk a little bit about leadership, and then we'll come back.
Yeah, let's do it.
For many years, spoke about the future to organizations and governments. And what I realized that very few people actually were changing their behavior in line with this future. And so I would speak to organizations, do the strategy sessions, everybody was positive, and I would go back and pretty much nothing had changed. And so then I started writing this book called Foresight. And I broke it down into understanding the different sights we have as human beings. And by sight, I don't only mean this sight, but I mean perspective of sight. And so the first sight that I broke down in that book was hindsight. And hindsight are people that live in their memories and keep repeating their memories. There's a great saying from Dr. Joe Dispenza. He says, are you living a life based on a set of memories from your past, or are you living a life based on the vision of your future? And many people are in repetition of their pasts, expecting a different outcome, but really just living the same life over and over and over. And businesses and people in positions of executive power are really kind of trying to relive their past and do it just a bit better. And if you're living in hindsight, you're never able to prepare for the future because you're much more focused on your past and repeating it than you are actually developing anything new and working towards it. And most of the world is stuck in hindsight without even realizing that they're stuck in hindsight. The second sight that I unpacked is plain sight. the people that are the logical thinkers, they don't like any idea around what we perceive as what we receive. They are not thinkers or believers in quantum science. What they are is believers in Newton science or Newtonian science. And Newtonian science says for every action, there's a reaction. Quantum science says you are the reaction. You are the one who is actually creating what you need to be seeing and receiving and projecting and expecting. All of it's you. None of it's anybody else's. And it's funny because as human beings, what we do is we love to take ownership of the cool things that we create or the synergies, but the bad things are never us. That's somebody else or the government or whoever it is, not us. And so we fall into a state of victimhood when we're in plain sight. And then you get insights. And insights are the people with the incredible levels of education, the ones that have got all the degrees ready, geared, and tooled up for a complicated world. Those people are in high levels of insight. But what foresight is, for me, is the level of heart-led decision-making based on what makes you curious, adaptable, optimistic, and excited. Because when you start making decisions from that place, when you break out the mindset that you have to be following a degree to become successful, when you can realize that your uniqueness, your combination of topics, no matter what field or sector that is in, will actually be your most powerful version of yourself. Because what you want to do is you want to include or infuse or focus your life on what makes time disappear. And when you are doing something that makes time disappear, you are now in your flow state. And when you're in your flow state, you are at your most curious, you're at your most creative. And so foresight is the combination of brain, heart coherence so that you can have this very elegant, calm, focused energy and access to this collaborative process of innovation and disruptive ideas. So you have to ask yourself a question, both in your organization as well as in yourself. Are you living in hindsight, plain sight, insight, or are you ready for some foresight?
I then asked John what he thought was needed for future leadership.
So leadership is not about new practices. It's about new principles and a deep human philosophical discussion we actually need to have. And look, this happens in all fields of human endeavor. It's happened in physics, in medicine. It's happening in climate change right now. And it comes to a point that you cannot solve new problems using old ways. And so if we realize that the principles of bureaucracy, of formalization, specialization, standardization are great if your goal is efficiency at scale. But today, the world doesn't need efficiency at scale. It needs adaptability at scale. And so we have to realize that it's not just the coronavirus that's done this. We've also had the fear of climate change or the reality of climate change happening around us, ethnic conflict, mass economic migration, cyber threats, job displacement. There's so many moving parts that the leadership are really out of their depth. They don't understand how they want to go about doing this because ultimately most leaders are addicted to power and they can't let go of their power. They don't trust the younger generation to do a better job. And that's where the real immaturity lies, is that they have totally out of their depths in understanding this new world. Every time you watch the Senate interview anybody in tech, you can see how out of touch they are with what's actually going on in the ground. And a lot of leaders want their organizations to seem agile, but really are unwilling to dedicate themselves to the principles of autonomy, speed, transparency, meritocracy, and experimentation. The older generation can't actually let go of the old ways of thinking. And so it's like almost a dictator holding an election. It's got all the trappings of democracy, but there's the spirit of this new type of leadership is totally missing from these old school types of leaders. And these old school type of leaders have been focused on economies of scale because that's what's been shoved down our throats through accounting and economics and through every type of business formula or business degree that anybody got. It was all about economies of scale. And these leaders are all following that doctrine. But today we find ourselves in the need of economies of learning. And so we have to move from this hierarchical process to a networked one. And it's not really a bureaucracy that's stifling us. It's our addiction to power. And it's our leaders that don't want to let go of that power. And the new world we're in right now doesn't need power over anymore. It needs power with And this is the new type of power, which is actually a much more feminine power and not less a young, immature, masculine power. And so we have to realize that the world we're living in right now doesn't just require a new principle. It actually requires a new philosophy.
Keith, I know you were chomping at the bit there. I was getting, you were chatting with me on the side.
This, of all the people, I missed the opportunity to talk to this guy. Oh,
hey, I gave you the chance.
I know.
And if you remember last week,
me, it's all my fault. Okay, so first and foremost, it is so rewarding to hear that John, who is so intimately aware and a part of Singularity University. And if for those of you that don't know what Singularity University is doing, instead of watching the news tonight, Google Singularity University and just learn about them. Spend 15 minutes, just tip of the iceberg kind of thing, and you'll see where I'm going with this. But the truth of the matter is that, you must have been smiling ear to ear 10 minutes ago when I was telling you my thoughts, because there's so much to the truth of what's going on. I actually found a couple places I didn't necessarily agree with the way he said something, but with that in mind, I absolutely agree with it. And, the one place that I want to maybe add to is that he mentions how leadership and I mean, we're talking about leaders across the globe in every industry. We're no longer talking about HR leaders. We're no longer talking about sales leaders. What we're doing now is talking about everyone who is in a leadership position, and how the very vast majority of them are in their deep, like what he said. He says they're out of their depth. They're over their head, and they don't know where to go. I think that the path of least resistance to a better world has to start with individuals. I don't think it's leadership. As a matter of fact, I think it's that habit of waiting for some leader to show up and take you to the promised land is what's keeping people from actually making the kind of progress that they could. And he references Joe Dispenza and Flow State and Stephen Kotler. People should be Googling these names and understanding that quite literally you can live in a world and, maybe more importantly, begin to contribute to a world that's built on a new platform that isn't about scaling for the sake of money, but for growing a business because it's fun to do and you can help people. And you might make money along the way. So there's so much to go here. And it's funny because it's almost time to sign off. And yet again, it's just me and you. And I feel like we could go for another hour. And that's only part. That was 14 minutes out of a 15-minute conversation I had with him. So you can imagine. And for those who are interested in seeing the whole presentation or the whole conversation, not a presentation, you can go to crowdcast.io. That's crowdcast.io /Ira Wolf, and John's webinar is posted there along with the upcoming ones, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and any of the other past ones we've had. We've had some great conversations. John just was, just really, really good. Again, I think his so many concepts just in those 14 minutes that we heard from him. Economies of scale or adaptability at scale. Economies of learning, not economies of scale. When he talked about plain sight, there's a lot of victimhood going on right now, that it's somebody's fault. We see that all the time. I mean, the reason that, I heard this yesterday, the reason that the college, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 called off their time. It's like, it's the governors, it's the politicians, it's the Democrats. Hey, if everybody wore their masks and kept a safe distance and did their part, then there might have been a football season. But because it became so politicized and different, and we had to find someone to blame for our inconvenience, it was there. And I don't want to go down the political road, but you know what? But it's macro, we didn't even mention or re-mention the feminine movement.
Well, we did last week. That was interesting because I had talked to John the day before. Lori Rudiman was on when we talked about your work is not your worth. And I said, that Lori needed to, she would love that topic, and I knew you would too. But we've just got a few minutes here. I do want to remind everybody, or not remind everybody, but let everybody know I've got another webinar coming up tomorrow. And, I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Diane Hamilton. You've heard her on the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. Tried to get it out too fast. We're going to be talking to her again, a recap. And this was amazing. This statistic I just ran across. Only 24% of employees feel curious. Now, with everything we just talked about today,
totally get it.
70% of people are disengaged, which maybe it's that 70% are also not curious. They want to be told what to do. They want to be given a paycheck. They just want to know that everything's going to work out. Yeah. And 70%, but here's the other kicker. 70% said they face barriers at work when they ask questions. This is nuts. So what we're going to be talking about tomorrow, which is Thursday, August 13th, just for anybody who's looking at the calendar. Basically, you can go to crowdcast.io/Ira Wolf, and you can sign up. It's free. And Dr. Diane Hamilton and I will be talking about curiosity and cracking the curiosity code.
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah, real quick.
Because of the topics today, I got to remind everybody, please, if you're curious about developing from the inside out, check out keithcampagna.com. Life-work integration is real. It's something that anyone can create a life they feel is worth living, no matter your stress, no matter where you're starting, no matter where you want to go. If you want help, I can help. Reach out through keithcampagna.com.
Appreciate that. And we will be talking about that. I know you sent me a chat. And next week, actually, we're going to be talking about one of my new favorite subjects, which is blue ocean strategy. Yeah. And there's going to be a follow-up today because we're going to be talking about where are the opportunities that are right in front of us that we're missing. How do you find those? Because there's a lot of blue ocean out there right now. Only people are just seeing red. Again, if you want to listen to John Sanei's presentation, one is you can go pick up his book, Foresight, or if you want to listen to the whole presentation, it's actually on my YouTube channel as well, which is youtube.com/Ira Wolf. You can watch it there, or go to crowdcast.io. This has been another episode. Our 32nd of the year is now under our belt. We want to thank everybody for listening. We want to thank Zor.ai and Success Performance Solution for being our sponsors and allowing us to be on the air. We've been having, we've just hopefully elevated this conversation for you. I know it's been really, a wonderful experience with Keith and myself. We love learning from people. We love sharing that. And we're going to keep it going. We just signed on for W4CY for another year. So we're going to be here for hopefully up to 150 shows or more. And we'll be keeping going on. So you can catch any of the replays on Apple Podcasts, Google, iHeart, Spotify, almost anywhere that you want to go. And also we'll be back next week, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, W4CY.com. This is Ira Wolf and Keith Campagna from the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. Don't let this shift hit your plans.